Haha, fatal blow. Hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, I'm afraid I'm a little bored this week. I don't know, I just can't seem to get in the groove, can't seem to get real excited. Have you noticed, buddy? Yeah. And you know what that means, right? No, it doesn't mean I go out and dig up bones. It means I try something new. New. Yeah, it's a bit of a bad habit, I'm afraid. Ends up costing me a lot of money. Sometimes you just want to freshen things up. Add a little spice. Get a little excited about something, right? I think I'm just having a come down off of that holiday gift giving episode. Those are always so much fun. But today, we're going to play with something that I've been asked by a few of you in the past to try, and I've just kind of put it off. What is it? The Dagger. Or the sword. I think they're called both, and just depends on the length. This kind of qualifies as a sword, I believe. Look at that. Brand new, spanking, crispy, never been used Princeton Neptune. Still in the wrapper. I don't know what's wrong with me. Stop asking.
I admit it, you are better than I am.
And I got a smaller one too. This one I have experimented with in the past. We're talking maybe 2 years ago. I don't know. Swords, daggers, or another word they're called is stripers, are prized by botanical artists or decorative artists because they can get these flowing lines that can go from a really thin line, and we'll demonstrate some of that. But you know, I thought, how might I explore my mark making options in landscape? This will do some interesting things, and I'm anxious to do a spontaneous landscape, a small one maybe, and show you some mark making experiments with a dagger or a sword. And I hope you in the comments who have used these a lot and use them successfully, tell me what you like about them, what kind of strokes that you like to get with these. So, not putting it off any longer. Let's get into the duel, the sword fight as it were. The challenge between brush and paper. Alright, so here's what I'm going to use. This is actually Kilimanjaro watercolor paper, 100% cotton. This is a spiral bound sketchbook. They're natural white. I'm doing this in a fairly small book because I'm going to use these two daggers. And for the sake of this video, I'm just going to stick with dagger. That's the more common term. This may actually be a sword due to its length. I don't know. I don't care. What's more important is how they work. But as I was saying, I want to do the entire landscape with these. I am going to keep this oval wash handy in case I need some big washes. All three of these are Princeton Neptunes. Princeton Neptunes are one of Princeton's highest quality watercolor brushes. This and the Elite. If you didn't have any brushes but Princeton Neptunes and Princeton Elites, you would have some of the best synthetic brushes on the market. The difference is Princeton Neptunes are softer. They're made to imitate squirrel, so they hold more water. They don't really hold as much water as real squirrel, but that's fine. They have a little more snap, but they're still limper, not as stiff as, say, the Princeton Elite. That's a Princeton Elite right there. That's a long round. These are made to simulate Kolinsky sable, and as I mentioned, these are made to imitate squirrels. They're two great brushes, two great brush lines from a great brush company. Anyway, I'm just gonna play with this, do a little bit of a small spontaneous landscape, and see what I can do. One of the things I think is very important, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about these daggers or any other brush, is you ought to pay attention to your mark making. Do some experiments with all your brushes and try various forms of mark making, especially with landscape. Landscape really depends on some very spontaneous, unique looking mark making. So mark making is something that just goes down, looks fresh, expressive, not labored, not overworked. With what little experimenting I've done with these, I have some ideas that there may be some possibilities here for landscape. But what I did want to show you is some of the common things that these are more known for. All right, I think one of the most common things I've seen daggers used for are leaves, decorative painting, leaves. And there are several ways you can hold the brush. You can hold it tip down with the tip at the top and blade down, I should say. and then you get a broad stroke when you move it sideways. Another way is holding it sideways, this way or that way. And it just produces these really interesting sweeping strokes. A common stroke I see is a leaf stroke like this. I'm holding the blade to the right and then the opposite way, and I'm not practiced at this, but then leaving a vein, sort of a space in the middle. There are any number. I've seen one stroke sort of leaf shapes, and it does depend a great deal on how you hold the brush. Another cool thing is just that knife edge that you can get. And so I see some painters use it for grasses, and then maybe this kind of a little thing. And this is one of the things I want to try and use in detailing. You also will hear these referred to as stripers, just because you can do these really interesting stripes. I think hand sign painters employ a version of these brushes, if I'm not mistaken. It really holds a lot of water, especially since I'm using a Princeton Neptune. So you have the hair that holds a lot of water, but you have a long brush, so it kind of is like a rigger, in that riggers are long, hold a lot of water. And I suppose you could do two strokes in the opposite direction, but they just make some interesting kind of botanical shapes where very fast without drawing these flowing lines or anything. Anyway, that's sort of the claim to fame and sort of the stock in trade of a Dagger, but I'm interested in finding out what else it'll do. And so I want to get into doing some painting of an actual landscape. I am going to use this oval wash, I think, to mix some color. Color wise, I think I'm going to go for a cobalt blue and some fall colors. Fall colors around here are really pretty right now, and there's a lot of green, sort of a green gold. So that's, to me, that's like an azo green. And we're going to get some reds and some violets. This is pretty much just going to be nothing special, just I want to do like a tree line, maybe with a foreground, kind of vignetted. So it's not going to be a lot of painting here. Maybe sort of a Z shape, sort of a tree line down to foreground back. We'll start with a sky. I do want to use some spray. Just to get this moving quick. Sometimes the simplest, quickest skies are the best ones. I don't want to do too much with that oval wash. Go ahead and get this bigger Dagger employed right away. And I'm going to mix some of that cobalt blue with the azo green. You won't see a lot of expression in these strokes where it's wet and wet yet. So I'm probably going to do some wet and wet here. And then let it dry and do a lot of hard strokes. Actually, I'm going to come down here and get a little nickel quinacridone gold. I like the distance. This just creates some sort of bouncy distance between where I'm painting, even holding it up here. But if I've come back here, the expressiveness is what I was hoping for and what I'm seeing. You know, this scene is already painting itself almost. I'll do a little bit of backwash in the sky here. Just want to separate that blue from these trees that are developing. Now, when I talk about expressive mark making, this is what I'm talking about. And there are telltale marks that brushes make, rounds especially. It's hard to get a lot of variety and unique mark distinction with a round. I mean, you can, it just takes practice. I like exploring different marks, and I think that was the draw for me for doing this exercise. Let me get some center of interest here. Maybe I'm going to go sideways with this. One of the things I do from making trees is I do sort of with rounds, is I do sort of a scrubby series of umbrella shapes. Let's see what happens when I do that. That's interesting because I got that blade touching there. I didn't really mean for that to happen, but see, look at these little wispy whiskers coming out off of that. That's pretty neat. So that's going to make a nice tree. If you don't know what I mean when I say some scrubby umbrella shapes, I'm talking about this. So a tree, and I'm going to slow it down and make it a little more laborious. See these little umbrella shapes? And I'll scrub back and forth and make little umbrella-like arcs. And then I just widen it out. And depending on the overall shape of your tree, that makes a neat tree. But I'm getting these additional little fingers extending off here that this brush is giving me. That I don't get in a round. And I got some, this is all still wet, so I'm going to take advantage of that. Because if I can create some little areas of contrast, I can create some underbrush. A number of you have been inspired by my spontaneous landscape, and that's very gratifying. And I love the fact that I see your Instagram posts and things where you're trying it, and that's great. I am so glad to see you doing that. When you do try them, just be fresh. Keep your strokes abbreviated and don't overdo it. When you get a wet and wet situation that's looking kind of interesting, be careful not to overdo it. And I'm almost about to violate that myself. Just want to dab in some areas where I know there's going to be some contrast. I am loving it already. Why is it taking me so long to try a dagger in landscape? I mean, look at this. This is just... I'm going to switch to the smaller one. That's cool. That's just... can make these kind of vertical, almost fir-like trees. But if you go sideways even a little bit, you get sort of interesting shape. These little areas I'm just strengthening contrast, and this is starting to dry, and this is going to sort of make a colored backwash of sorts, which is great because I'm actually trying to create a foreground separation, a transition here to some bushes. I'm going to get some very faint, that's not very faint, distant stuff going here, almost misty and distance. Yeah, it's neat. This, I mean, the tip is just dancing over the surface, different from my hand strokes, and that's what I was looking for. All right, we're going to let this dry before I get too carried away, and come back with a little bit more dry painting. Only thing I want to do is maybe filigree this transition a little bit more. Maybe blend it out in a few places so it's not one continuous hard line. Alright, it's pretty well dry. Let's see what we can do here. So I'm going to work on detail in these areas, and what I want to do is enhance contrast. That's my usual modus operandi for spontaneous painting. And I got some nice contrast edge transitions going here, so I'm going to make some things happening in here. All I'm doing is I'm just letting the tip of this dagger just sort of dance. And occasionally this blade, I'm not trying to do that, but occasionally this blade back here touches. I don't mind that. This is all very loose. Can do almost some rigger-like work because it holds a very fine line. So I'm going to try turning it around this way. Just trying to get some leafy shape kind of things. I'm just kind of fooling around with the ground. I hadn't planned on making this a reflection, but it's starting to almost look like a reflection. So I got some wet shapes here. I'm just trying to see what happens. Seems to work best just to let the dagger tip do whatever it wants to do rather than force it to do things. Kind of like these little triangular marks that the tip makes when you press and pull sideways. So I'm getting some interesting marks, and I know some of you may be thinking, well, I don't see what's so great, but if you work much with rounds, which I would do a lot of this work with a round, if I start dabbing and pulling up and doing little sideways movements with a round, basically you get little round ovals. This is giving me more angular shapes, and I really am liking that. You know, and of course the thing is that you could employ this for some of the painting. I'm forcing this to do all of the painting, but I get more control over rendering shapes with the tip. But if I want to let this tip dance and do some interesting things, sort of press and pull it up and sideways. And this is neat too. When I do these little ground effects, let me show you. You know, I could, a round would do something like this, or you could press it and the round would get fat and thin, fat and thin. You can do that with a round. I like these little angular sort of things like this. See, to me, to a landscape painter, when you're looking for nice random sort of marks, those are gold. I think, anyway. So I'm going to let the tip dance down here. I don't want to get rid of all this nice, wet, washy stuff, but I want to add some distinct shapes. And let's spray it. I like getting this nice little dark pop of contrast right in here. I just got little things going through my head. What happens if I do that? What happens if I do this? And this little wet and wet area I created with the spray is just giving me the opportunity to add a little what looks like filigree detail. I'm pretty happy with the detail. I want this to stay a little less defined and keep a nice center of interest of detail here. And now what I need to do is add some sticks and branches up here so that that looks like a tree, looks more like a tree. I like that I can just use this instead of switching to a rigger or a small round. I will definitely be employing this brush more often because I just like the expression. I like the expressiveness it's adding to the line, the slightly different character that I get with a normal brush. Won't be using it for everything, but I'll definitely bring this into more paintings, I think, in the future. Alright, well, I will stare at it for a bit and see if there's anything else I want to tweak it with, but I think for the most part, I'm going to go with that. Painted 100% with a dagger, or a sword, whichever you prefer. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Maybe you've got a dagger laying around and you want to get it out and play with it. I would advise it. It's pretty fun. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, patrons, for sponsoring this channel, and we will see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.